Three, two, one. Giacomo Zucco, we're live. How you doing, man?
Fine, thanks. What about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Excited to have you here, man. And thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. For the people that are new to the space, obviously everybody that's in the Bitcoin space knows you well. But for those that are new, if we can start, you can give us a little bit of background. You graduated from University of Milan in theoretical physics, spent some time in politics with the Tea Party Italia, then spent some time in corporate, and then you got into Bitcoin with BHB Network and Bitcoin Maximalist. Why you don't walk us through your journey, how you got into Bitcoin?
Basically, Bitcoin started to pop up in different aspects of my life. As you said, I was involved in political activism, and I was involved in different, not overlapped groups of political activists. And there was this group that was mostly about privacy and, WikiLeaks and transparency, Julian Assange. And in 2012, Bitcoin started to pop up very frequently in this kind of environment. And then there was the group about gold bugs and the Fed and the central banks, Ron Paul. And this was a group which was basically completely not related with the other, and Bitcoin started to pop up even here for very different reasons. On one side was for privacy, and the other side was about sound money and monetary policy. Then in my work I was a technology consultant and I was working around payments, and Bitcoin started to pop up as a payment technological innovation with some scientific interest. So every aspect of my life started to actually be somehow infected by the Bitcoin virus. So my wife in 2013, she looked at my life, and she said, basically everything you're doing is somehow connected with Bitcoin. You're talking about Bitcoin in every separated environment of your life, but it's everything very compartmentalized. You should do Bitcoin full time. So in 2013, I quit my corporation job, and I started to join several Bitcoin related startups, some of them important, like Green Address Wallet, which I worked with and for a few months, or other less important. Over the course of 2013 and 2014. In 2015, I opened my own research center and consultancy firm, which is Blockchain Lab and BHB Network as a non-profit.
Oh, great. There was a specific time when you realized that Bitcoin was it, or just grow gradually as you were more involved?
Yeah, it was pretty gradual. Especially, it was like Bitcoin was okay. Was clearly something in any single aspect of it, but it was not the thing until I started to realize the connection between several important aspects of it. So right now, Bitcoin is basically most of everything I think about during most of my waking time. It's my business, it's my passion, it's my political activism, is my main philosophical interest, is also my social gossip life. When we discuss with my wife about what our friends are doing or what public figures are doing, we don't talk about sports or some kind of royal family, or we talk about Bitcoiners or shitcoiners and what they do.
Yeah, I think it's common things for Bitcoiners, for people in the space. So if you don't mind, I'll give you like 2 minutes of what we're doing here in London with Bitcoin and Blockchain London. We spoke about, but for the people that connected that are in London that might be interested, just a quick 2 minutes. So I started this about a year ago here in London, as I noticed that there was not a strong Bitcoin community here, which sounds kind of weird being London, one of the major city, especially for finance. So I started last year. We're like a couple of people really, getting together in Shoreditch, which is in the heart of London, and slowly growing to 902 members now, growing quite fast at a rate of about 100 members a month. Unfortunately, London, as you might imagine or you might have heard, is infested with shitcoin private blockchain conferences, which are dominating the space. God knows why. And that's what we're facing. But what we're trying to do here in London is obviously to increase the interest in Bitcoin for people that are new to the space, and more importantly, the knowledge around Bitcoin and open blockchain. So because some people are just ignorant about, they don't even know the existence or the main principle of it. So we're trying to do that, building a true community here in London, at the same level what we have in San Francisco, what we have in Berlin with the Fulmo guys, or what you guys are doing in Milan. So our meetups are quite heterogeneous in terms of group of people. It's an interesting mix. So you see the banker, Wall Street type of person to the blockchain, Ripple, Ethereum lover, which I call Bitcoin curious, because apparently for some reason they don't know about Bitcoin, but they develop in Ethereum or Ripple or whatever, right? Which is kind of interesting. And then the Bitcoin developers community, which is also pretty strong, and the usual cypherpunk, like anarchist and libertarian. So we often 3 main type of meetups that developed in this year. The main one being the debate style meetup, which is kind of interesting. So I lay out an argument, and people that are part of the meetup participate, usually with a counter argument, trying to break down my main argument. And it's very interesting because it comes out like a lot of interesting aspects that you haven't considered, and also make you a strong, your argument stronger, because what could be the weak point. So I find that to be very interesting, and also because you can research more on things that maybe you didn't quite fully research. Then the second was the Bitcoin and blockchain class. In fact, when I started this was just that. It was called Bitcoin and blockchain class, where I explained the Bitcoin protocol, the security principle, the economic principle of sound money, the basic of money, because some people lack that as well. So most of the people, and we have Safety. Now we have some people giving an overview of things, but with this one we try to give like twice a month or at least once a month classes where people come and ask questions, and we present the different aspect of that. And then lastly, we started a special guest presentation, which is kind of very, very interesting. We have a couple of weeks ago, you might have heard Nick Carter from Castle Island Venture, which you know well from the Riga conference. And in 2 weeks, we're going to have Federico Tenga from Chainside, which of course you know very well. So excited for that. So all in all, if you're in London, Giacomo, you're more than welcome. We're actually looking forward to see you.
Definitely.
Bitcoin and blockchain London, and for everybody that's connected, below is the link if you want to be a member and come to join our meetups.
I will stop there. What you're doing is very important. I think I have some kind of answer about your question of why is London such a polluted environment from other kind of nonsensical blockchain-ish or crypto things. One of the reasons could be that London is and was an epicenter of incumbent fintech evolution, and Bitcoin is very, very difficult to frame into the framework of incumbents. So if you are an entrepreneur who does mobile payment apps, closed source proprietary code with fees, lock-in of the user, selling the private information of the user, you are in a completely different mindset, and you really have an hard time to adapt to the new framework of Bitcoin. Also, if you are all about, if 90% of the budget of your company is compliance and KYC AML and identity management and identity tracking, a technology that can work with payments without identity at all is something which is very outside of your mental box. So the more the traditional, at this point, legacy fintech environment is big, the more there is a cognitive dissonance versus Bitcoin.
It's interesting to see if at some point there's going to be the two will merge in some way. Well, actually, what do you think about that? That's actually just thought about it.
I don't know, because the business models in Bitcoin are still very, very unclear for me. Like, for example, I always do this example about a good Bitcoin wallet. If you have a good Bitcoin wallet, it's open source, no industrial secret, no patent, no lock-in for the users, no private information collected from the users. So basically, all the business models that you usually have are gone, and you have to find new ones, which we still don't know how are they made. And on the other side, these guys from the legacy fintech environment, they have some very strong habits that are completely disrupted. So maybe Bitcoin is destined to attract and attack the same target users, but completely disintermediating this kind of fintech culture. Maybe traditional super legacy banking can be paradoxically closer to work together with the new Bitcoin paradigm than a fintech startup. If you are a PayPal clone, working with Bitcoin is very, very difficult because you are disintermediating yourself. But if you are an investment bank, investing in this new asset class on behalf of your traditional clients is actually something that is pretty rational to do if you want to lower the global risk because this new asset class is correlated. So a super traditional investment banking could be closer to somehow operate with Bitcoin in a very improper way than a new Silicon Valley style fintech trendy startup.
I hear you. Very good point. So, so we started now the YouTube live interview. You're the first one here, so let's get right in. So we discussed over Twitter for a while, and then we finally met in Riga. We had a nice chat. Riga conference was great presentation, great content, and then the B Foundation was announced. We saw some disagreement, some debates. So let's start with that. That's the first point in my list. So it's kind of a loaded question, a 4-point question I'm going through now. So what is the primary purpose of the B Foundation? I'm sure you heard that many times. What problems you're trying to solve? And what do you think it will be a positive outcome for the B? And why do you think it was so controversial? Is the name or there's more behind it? And finally, what's next for the B?
So the primary goal is actually to link somehow the resources, the financial resources that are interested in Bitcoin development. Of course, not just, selfishly interested. There are a lot of companies, for-profit companies, or even some Bitcoin whales, which will like to somehow use their financial weight in order to help Bitcoin adoption and Bitcoin evolution somehow. And on the other hand, you have a lot of interesting projects that are really underfunded, and there is no, in my experience and in the experience of the other people which is involved in this initiative, especially Elena Vranova, there was not a clear and obvious way to bridge these two sides of this arbitrage. So there is a lot of money. A lot of my clients asked me, how can I pay for RGB development or open timestamps development? Like I convinced many clients that they did not need a blockchain. What they need was just some trivial timestamping, and the best way was to use the open protocol open timestamps. And then these people asked me, yeah, but open timestamps is not implemented this and this and this, and we need the interface, we need a better UX, we need this kind of integration. Can I pay you to do that? And my answer was, not, you can, because I'm not a software out. You can donate. This is a free. I mean, if you try to pay me, I will hire the worst people to do the job, because this is a free, spontaneous, organic ecosystem, and you need the best guys to be inspired to do what they want. So what you can do is maybe I can help you to put money in a bounty. So basically, that's what the B wants to do: connect with a bounty model system, connect business and big Bitcoin owners to Bitcoin development. When I say Bitcoin development, I don't mean Bitcoin protocol deep level layer 1 development, like hard forks, soft forks, because that could be politically too sensitive. I mostly mean development on top, user experience, especially multi-sig security and Lightning apps, new asset protocols, maybe side chains and stuff like that. Also, another goal is to try to create some kind of education that we very aggressively called marketing, because we want to express the image of not just a very slow and deep education, but also a very impactful education, immediate education for people that doesn't have a lot of time to distinguish between things, because right now all these resources of money, but also of development time, are flowing through towards ineffective or scammy or I mean or dead doom projects, like I mean, a lot of developers are wasting their time and their reputation creating fake decentralized dApps in Solidity. A lot of companies are wasting money into creating private blockchains. So we want to try to debunk myths and to set the record straight about marketing. Scammy projects, by definition, scammy centralized projects have a lot of marketing resources, because most 90% of the resources of many altcoins are actually just marketing. Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing department, and that's good, but we want to try to create a counter marketing department. We don't think that Bitcoin needs this. We think that the people, our targets, need this. Is not, we don't do this to save Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to win on its own or to fail, but it will not be because of us. But we want to save people from misallocation of resources in the short time. So about the controversy, I think that the name is not the only controversial part of this initiative, but I think the name was the trigger of all the controversial parts of this initiative. So possible controversial parts of this initiative could be, there is one concern about centralization of efforts, like if I do my bounty programs and Elena does her owns, and then somebody in Blockstream, Lighting Labs, or Casa Hodl, they also do their bounty programs. This is very inefficient in a way, because it's decentralized, and decentralization is inefficient, but also very resilient or even anti-fragile. So it's difficult to co-opt it, to corrupt it, to censor it, to infiltrate it. So it's very resilient. While if we unify all these activities mostly in one single bounty workflow, then we have something which is more centralized, so more efficient, and that's what I want. I want efficiency, because my previous efforts was inefficient, but we also have more fragility. So I think that for Bitcoin itself, centralization will be terrible, but for a Bitcoin UX and education supporting effort, we prefer efficiency over anti-fragility. So that's the first concern. The second concern was actually to mix ourselves with marketing at all. Like many engineers and nerd type, many hardcore Bitcoiners, the best of the Bitcoiners, they see marketing as many engineers. They see marketing as evil itself. Like you have to build product. If you try to sell, you're always fundamentally scamming somebody. Selling as an activity is a scamming, and it's always overselling in a way. It's never completely honest. That's the world view of many engineers. So we will try to do some marketing activity over Bitcoin, and that could be controversial in itself. The third controversy is that we will ask for donation and for money, and we will use money in an unaccountable way, and that's typical of many non-profit. I mean, when you have a for-profit activity, your shareholders or your clients, they keep you straight. While when you have a no-profit, there could be some kind of responsibility loosening over time, and that's a concern for many foundations, for example, the infamous Bitcoin Foundation. And the last and more important concern is that even if we are not promoting ourselves as the official representation of Bitcoin, as the rulers, the leaders of Bitcoin, the fact that if we have success and if we become big and influent and important, then people, especially people from the media, they will try to depict us as the Bitcoin leaders and the Bitcoin official representatives. And that's a very serious concern. And so I think that these concerns are right. I think we can somehow keep at bay many of these concerns, but what triggered the level of concern was the name that I choose few minutes before the stage presentation. So the legal entity that we are going to use is the Liechtenstein-based foundation. So it is a foundation, and it has to have the term foundation in the legal name. So many people were discussing backstage about the fact that it was reminding the old scammy Bitcoin Foundation, which was a disaster because it was misallocation of all the concerns of before all together, they become true. They became the self-appointed as the representatives of Bitcoin. They have been used to attack Bitcoin with Gavin Anderson. They have been all the possible concerns like Vinnie Lingham. It was a disaster. So many people were concerned about the term foundation be linkable to that, and I said, let's not hide it. Let's just put it there. Let's mock the name Bitcoin Foundation with the B Foundation, which is a little bit like, you know, Bitcoin Cash, Bcash. And that was that was probably a bad idea marketing-wise. I'm not a marketing guy, actually. And so my call was probably very bad. I think that in the long run, if we manage to do something right and to really do what we intend to do, this controversy will just have helped to spread the message initially and to give attention to the initiative. And the controversy also put a lot of pressure and focus on us in order not to screw up. So we will be super. I think we will be more aware thanks to the controversy than we would have been without. So in a way, everything is good. Next steps to finish the answer. We don't want to, I'm answering questions about this in interview and so on, but we're not going to do any more announcement or presentations or anything until we have the workflow for the donations active, both technically with the website for donating Bitcoin to the projects, or to claim Bitcoin for some open source projects, and legally with the entity that will actually receive these Bitcoins and donate this Bitcoin. It's important to have a legal entity. We cannot just do that with a website, because most of the donors we are talking about, they cannot just take Bitcoin and donate them to anonymous people. They need in their books, they need to take into account a legal entity name for the donation to write it off, and having fiscal exemptions and so on. So the donors, they don't want to use private hidden anonymous funds to donate for the project. Even if you have 2 Bitcoins in a declared company fund, and you have 2 Bitcoin secret anonymous account, you want to donate the first, not the second. I agree with that. So we need a legal entity because of that. So next steps will be operative, hopefully in November. Me and Alina, we have been a little bit cut in other stuff during October, but hopefully in November we will accomplish technical and legal closure of the bootstrap. And so next step will be making donations and bounties happen, and then we will talk again about strategic objectives for the future.
So we're not going to talk about the B anymore. That's the last interview.
yeah, probably yes.
All right, thanks. Moving on to the next. So we've seen some comments and tweeters about Bitcoin maximalist, and you have said during the Riga presentation we shouldn't be nice with scammer. And to be honest, I feel quite close to the maximalism concept as we have discussed in Riga. But I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. You're probably the best person to answer. What you don't like that you see now of Bitcoin maximalists, and second, what do you think? Do you think there is too much Twitter banning going on, especially around when somebody make a counter argument against a maximalist, which is most often than not resolved in trolling rather than an actual reasonable answer. So starting from the first one, what do you like about the big Bitcoin maximalists that you have seen on Twitter, if anything?
So one of the reasons in Riga I decided to give a apologetic presentation about maximalists, like we shouldn't be ashamed of being called maximalist. That's actually something which is a good service to the community. Is exactly because I don't think that anything in Bitcoin maximalism so far is particularly wrong. If anything, maximalism in Bitcoin is still very, very shy and very, very, I mean, a little bit too kind with irreasonable claims and unreasonable claims or exceptional claims. To give you an example, if you think about theoretical physics, physics by definition, or particle physics or nuclear physics, by definition, let's talk about nuclear physics, which is also security critical because you can blow up a power plant, or you can create a bomb and kill people. So, or you can die for radiation and cancer. So nuclear physics is very, very sensitive and very, very critical. So if you make extraordinary claims, unbelievable claims, exotic claims about theoretical physics, you will be subjected by the expert of the field of initial heuristics of cautious skepticism. So extreme claims will be treated as false until proven the contrary. So the burden of the proof is on you. If you come there and you say, no, just like plutonium is not radioactive because I have this new proof of stake plutonium, which is sharded, and so it's not radioactive. So you will not die of cancer, and your power plant will not explode. So the reaction by the community of people expert in nuclear physics will not be, let me explain you once again what the nuclear potential is and what a neutron is. I mean, okay, I can point you to free resources. I can spend my time to educate you freely about that. But the first approach is you are trying to mess with people's safety. And so let's stop here. What you're saying doesn't make any sense. Maybe you found a very, very important loophole in particle physics. Maybe you find low energy fusion reaction, so low energy nuclear reaction, so basically cold fusion. Maybe you find it, and that will be huge. So as physicists, we cannot rule out cold fusion from possibilities, because everything is possible. What we do know about physics is that our theory are not yet proven wrong, but we don't know that they are right. And physics is a continuous falsification of previous theory. So we want new stuff, we want challenges of the established knowledge, but the approach is not everything is possible and we try everything, especially with other people's lives at stake, until proven wrong. The approach is we use established knowledge to build our power plants and bombs, and then I don't know, X-ray machines. And only when you really convince us with your R&D that you discover something new, we can actually look into that. So Bitcoin maximalism is the same. We have very rational arguments about sound money, monetary theory, and we have very sound argument about, so you cannot bootstrap money or infinite number of times without infinitely diluting it. Also, we have good theories and established theories about software engineering and applied cryptography. You cannot recreate your cryptographic system all the times without screwing up. There is a very good old paper by Andrew Postra about altcoins, like treatise on altcoins. Why is creating a clone of Bitcoin incredibly hard without screwing up? Because it is hard to create a crypto system. You have so many moving pieces, and so I don't think that the point is to be close-minded. The point is to be as open-minded as nuclear scientists are. Very open-minded, like they are scientists, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to applaud you if you are selling to people uranium bars that are not radioactive because of your new sharding experiment.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I tend to agree with you also, and that leads to the next question, because I think on the other side, at least that's what I believe is that there are professional, what I call professional disinformer, like people that start to spreading specific rumor just to make people convinced of something that is completely unproven and doesn't have any basis of any sorts, just to make people more confused about Bitcoin. So leading to that, do you believe that people presenting nonsensical arguments, like the issue about the energy consumption in mining, for instance, they prop up almost every day? So like people like Rubini, for instance, do they have an agenda or they just don't get it? Well, what do you think? What do you think is of the two?
So I tend not to believe in usually as a prima facie heuristics. I tend to be skeptical about conspiracies and the secret organized agendas, while I tend to be very, very keen to think about interests and spontaneous alignments of interests. So I think that when I discuss about Bitcoin, I mostly separate two classes of individuals that I call scammers at the same way, which are no coiners. So like Rubini, people spreading misinformation about Bitcoin to negate that Bitcoin can exist or will be beneficial if existing, if it worked. And then like shitcoiners or multi-coiners, which are the people that acknowledge that Bitcoin can exist, and for that reason, anything else, even impossible, can exist, and you should buy their token in order to see that. So I think that both these categories of people, they don't participate probably in I mean, even if Bitcoin is going to touch very, very strong interest, so it's likely that we will see organized attacks on Bitcoin, and maybe even informational and cultural attacks on Bitcoin, and maybe we already witnessed to some attack on Bitcoin organized by the let's say incumbent power. I don't think that Rubini is necessarily a product of that. Rubini is seeking attention and visibility, and when something is popular, if you attack that something, you get visibility, and then you get you can sell books and you can sell consultancies. So attacking something popular is in itself a very interesting economic individual incentive. On the other side, the side of the shitcoiners, there are, I mean, the structure itself of the multi-coin, shitcoin ideal is and myth is that you can make money selling your newly printed money if you create enough confusion and enough misinformation about what you're doing. So there is a super strong. So how many? I talked before about cold fusion, but how many people are going around selling cold fusion? Like a couple of guys every 10 years they try to sell cold fusion, and it's a scam, and then no, I mean, they don't make a lot of money. While everybody can make money is if instead of cold fusion they try to sell the new Bitcoin 2.0. It's so easy and it's so rewarding in the short term, because you have the speculation, the FOMO, you have the first people to buy. I mean, it's like network marketing and Ponzi schemes. The first people buying off your lies, they will also make money finding the next suckers and the next suckers, and only the last layer of the pyramid will actually lose a lot of money. So it's so easy that you don't need an agenda, like an organized agenda, in order to spread lies about Bitcoin. The lie about energy consumption has been used by Rubini as much as by Vitalik Buterin when he promoted Ethereum as an environmentalist answer to Bitcoin.
Because you use proof of stake instead of proof of work, maybe, right?
Sorry?
Because you use proof of stake instead of proof of work.
Well,
just to
he said that, he would when he launched Ethereum, but then he never did, because proof of stake in a decentralized environment basically doesn't work. There is no active decentralized proof of stake without centralized coordinators or checkpoints who can work now in in the wild. So so Ethereum is still using, after years, proof of work, just like Bitcoin. But at the beginning, there was a lot of rhetoric about Ethereum being better because eventually they will go to proof of stake, and that was the same for a lot of other coins, from Peercoin to NXT and Ripple and so on. So there is incentive to spread misinformation about Bitcoin, not necessarily because of organized attacks. Also, I mean, organized attacks against Bitcoin will eventually happen.
All right, great. So let's move to the next point. I can hear my voice for some reason. One second. All right.
I try to mute myself until I answer. So maybe it's
yeah. Okay. So next is what's happening now with sidechain projects. So, for instance, when Blockstream recently came out with Liquid, find that to be very, very interesting as you open up Bitcoin to traditional finance. So do you think that sidechain is the future of Bitcoin? More specifically, do you think that it is a significant departure from Satoshi's original vision for Bitcoin? And related to that, do you think that all on-chain scaling options at this point have been explored, and this is the way to go?
So I will start from the bottom of your list of questions. I don't think the sidechain are mostly scaling solutions. Some flavor of sidechain that doesn't really exist right now, a sharded sidechain in which basically you can segregate the Bitcoin transaction in different local consensus without having a single global consensus, and then move Bitcoin from one local consensus to the other, but still avoiding double spending and avoiding the need for every node of the chain A to necessarily be forced to verify all the history of chain B. Because unless you have this kind of very complex sidechain that doesn't exist right now, then you don't have serious scaling advantages. So it's mostly, sidechains are mostly useful for experimentation and feature testing than for direct scaling improvement. But they can be used for scaling and indirectly, like in Elements sidechain or a Liquid sidechain or Blockstream. Many features have been tested before going to Bitcoin, like Segwit, which was itself an indirect scaling and direct scaling improvement, Schnorr signatures, and so on. So you can have scaling improvements on sidechains as a testing mechanism, and maybe in the future as a upgrade mechanism, which could be better than hard forks for some reasons. So it's not a scaling thing; it's an experimenting thing that could somehow also improve scaling. There are other scaling options like second layers, but not strictly speaking sidechains. Like Lightning Network is not a sidechain. Then there is the point of the definition of sidechain itself. The definition of sidechain was a blockchain like Bitcoin, but different for some reasons, that instead of recreating its monetary asset from scrap, was basically two-way pegged with Bitcoin in order to recreate a new architecture, but without the need to recreate also the money, the digital gold, basically, because that becomes very messy and also very scammy, because it creates incentives to ICOs or other things, and it creates a dilution of the total supply of Bitcoin economical substitutes. So basically the idea was, you want to experiment with new architecture. Maybe you want to try Mimblewimble, or you want to try Schnorr or client-side validation or whatever, but you don't want or you want to try Monero CT with ring signatures, but you don't want to rebootstrap money and digital gold out of nothing again for several reasons. Then you do a sidechain in order to recreate the infrastructure without recreating the money, the token supply and distribution and unicity. The problem here is that actually you can do a two-way pegging kind of model without having a chain, strictly speaking, on the other part. For example, Liquid is a side chain. I mean, it's a blockchain, but just because Blockstream wanted to keep full code-based interoperability, so they want to experiment features for Bitcoin on Liquid and then eventually propose it upstream for Bitcoin, like Segwit was done, etc., etc. And they want to reuse the Bitcoin code base, so they're keeping the blockchain structure. But you can imagine a side chain which is not a chain at all. For example, you can, in a way, the Bitcoin deposited on an exchange, they are Bitcoin that moves from the Bitcoin blockchain to a centralized database, and then they move owner, and then they get back to the Bitcoin chain if the database owner is honest. Of course, side chains are supposed to be more trustless than that in a way. So a federated side chain is something similar, but with not just database, but with a multi-sig structure. So you have more, you can rely on that structure more. But you can have a side chain which doesn't behave like a blockchain at all. For example, you can experiment with DAG, Briding, Tangle, and other kind of structure. Or if you think about L2, the new way to do the new possible way to do Lightning Network proposed by Christian Decker and others with a very nice paper, L2, like written ELTOO. In L2, if you also have something like a Mast and Schnorr, you can create a single Lightning Network channel with something like 100 participants. So is that basically something like a sidechain? In a way, yes, because you are freezing a Bitcoin, you're creating a Bitcoin there that can just pass hands just with one digital signature without any kind of block, because you can't have double spending, and then you can unfreeze this Bitcoin on the main chain. So I think that the notion of sidechaining will become more and more blurred in the next years. Like Liquid is a sidechain, but many things can be sidechain in the same way. So complex multi-sig schemes, complex trusted hardware environments, and stuff like that. So definitely, I think that layerization is the way to go for scaling and for innovation. So we will have a base layer which will be mostly stable and convergent, and like TCP/IP. So nobody touches TCP/IP. And then on top of that, we will have several layered innovations like sidechains.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's going to ossify, the main chain is going to ossify, and like TCP/IP, and then we're going to build on top. Yeah, makes perfect sense. All right, let's moving on to the next. So business opportunities. So we just spoke about Liquid. In addition to that, we have Lightning, C Lightning, and many more. So it seems like we're opening up all the opportunities for traditional finance, like brokerages, exchanges, payments, etc., to integrate with Bitcoin technology. What opportunity do you see in this space for people that want to contribute to this?
So one is the one that you mentioned, so basically financial infrastructure. For many, many asset classes, it exists a financial infrastructure with derivatives and contracts and many, many things. With Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a very, very young asset class, so there is a lot of financial infrastructure to build, which could be built in a traditional way, so trust-based, centralized, or even more interestingly, in a new decentralized, directly smart way. So you can have traditional derivatives over Bitcoin. That's already very interesting for me because it's a good use of a new asset class. Or you can have maybe trustless complex multi-sig derivatives on Bitcoin, which is even more interesting because it will be unregulated and permissionless and much more fun to see. Infrastructure, financial infrastructure is a thing. Then I think that there is a lot of space for UX improvement. Right now, the UX of Bitcoin is basically decoupled into two extremes. One is the extreme of the good Bitcoin engineers that create products that are very, very good about security, privacy, performances, but they are not optimized for UX, because good engineers, they don't really understand stupid users. They despise stupid users. They think command line, and they despise even graphic interface. So the better engineer you are, usually the worse you are at understanding the needs of the stupid graphic users. But on the other hand, you have good UX experts that disrespect any opinion by the real skilled engineers. So you have a super nerdy wallet, which for a normal user is very difficult to use, but it's super secure and private and well made and built upon good primitives. And then you have maybe some Coinbase wallet, which is from a technical point of view and the privacy point of view and any point of view, incredibly bad, but it has a very good marketing and UX, because the company invested in marketing and UX and not in alignment with engineers. So I think there is a big opportunity in bridging these worlds, creating some product with a good UX and marketing, but also with a respect of the best practices established by the best engineers and the best developers. The third opportunity that I see is about security improvements. Security improvements is something needed, because even if you are an advanced user, to secure your Bitcoin, it's very, very hard. And even if you want to be the ultimate judge of your Bitcoin, so even if you don't want to outsource security completely, because that makes sense with Bitcoin, that you don't outsource, otherwise you're not really using Bitcoin. But still, maybe having a third key that can activate after a certain point, the certain point in time, in order to manage your, for example, heritage to your loved ones in case something happens, or in order to resist to blackmail, or multi-sig complex security solution. So basically, what Casa Hodl and others are doing is very, very interesting. Or third key solutions, and Pamela Morgan and Andreas Antonopoulos. So thinking about how to use, or green address itself is a great example. So for example, you can have a wallet that for the first year you have to sign, but also the third party has to sign. So if your private key gets stolen, you still keep your funds safe, because you need a second factor from the third party. Then from the second year to the fifth year, you can spend your money alone. So the third party cannot spend your money at all. But then, since the fifth year on, both you and another third party can spend the money, so that if you lose your private key and you don't move your funds for 5 years, then somebody can go to this third party to ask for example, an inheritance or something. So this is just an example, but security improvements I think are a very big opportunity in this space, because right now security in Bitcoin is very, very hard, because either you optimize your threat model against the enemies, like the NSA is gonna take my Bitcoin, or you optimize against yourself, like I'm gonna lose my private key and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. And usually that's a big trade-off, and it's very difficult to make it to get it right.
I think one of the main issue there is that you can outsmart yourself, and when it's time to, that you need to use your private key, maybe you made it too complicated and you can reconstruct in the way.
Precisely. If you hid your private information too well, you are your own enemy, and basically you hidden it so well that you cannot recover it, and nobody can help you. and if you don't hit it too well, then somebody will eventually come and take it. So it's a very difficult trade-off. It's a very difficult balance.
Yeah, it's a catch-22. Next question related to this. So if investor interested to participate, is interested to participate in any of this project, you're probably going to say reach out to the B Foundation, but is there any communication channel that bridge the demand for funds with the technology offering, or is still like rudimental, like email marketing? And related to that, is crowdfunding, do you think, has ever been an option for that?
So I think it is, and it is one of the very few options. Also, basically a reward-based crowdfunding, just like in I was there. It's not really an equity-based crowdfunding because equities. I mean, I have helped many startups to get funding from traditional investors, but things played out in a very strange way because these startups basically they never really worked. The best Bitcoin startups I helped to fund, they never really worked on their product. They started to work on open standards. So for the investors, the things was weird because, yeah, we had the shares of the startups, but the startups is doing everything that it can to disintermediate itself, creating open libraries, shared with everybody. And that's weird. So the reason that we are creating the B Foundation itself is that I don't think the traditional VC model, I mean, it can be used, but it's not trivial to use in the Bitcoin space. So the crowdfunding or donation style, like open source style of contribution is probably at this stage more effective. It doesn't exist a structured way to do that, and that's actually the reason why we want to build a structured workflow to do that. Also, just last point about the B, when we will launch the B activity, we will make all the code of the donation workflow management website and all the legal documents for the incorporation of the legal structure completely open source. So even if you don't want to use the B, you can clone the B. So you can just copy the B and create your own. So let's see how this experiment goes, because right now I don't think there are trivial answers to your question.
That's actually very interesting. When do you think that will happen? I don't know if you already mentioned before.
Yeah, I hope that before the end of November we are up and running, both technically and legally, and probably some real workflow in December, I hope.
Okay, thanks. Next one is kind of already answered. So which type of project built on Bitcoin do you think is the most beneficial at this moment for Bitcoin to grow? And I listed like knowledge sharing, custody, wallet security, which you have mentioned, which I think you probably, is the one you will answer, but let you answer. Analytics, trading, like increased liquidity, like product, like liquid, lending, insurance, online retail. What do you think? What is the most beneficial for Bitcoin at this point?
All the ones mentioned before, I would add privacy projects. Like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is pretty good. I mean, Bitcoin scalability at the blockchain level sucks, but Bitcoin doesn't really need to be super scalable for a lot of years, in my opinion, because right now it's mostly a deflationary investment. Not really. Very few people will need to spend Bitcoin very, very soon. I mean, many people will, especially in the black markets and in the developing countries, they will need to spend Bitcoin. But it's something that we have some time to address. While the privacy part of Bitcoin, that's paramount, and that's very, very bad at the blockchain level. So we need a lot of work on that, and there is a lot of good work on that, like Wasabi Wallet with the Chaumian coin join, and Samurai Wallet experiments with Stoneway, Whirlpool, and Ricochet, and everything else. And the Lightning Network itself is a huge privacy enhancement. And then we have Join Market, which is very, very good. And for exchanges, we have decentralized experiments like BitKnow, and then we have well, we have a new awareness about, for example, the new Block Explorer by Blockstream. Blockstream.info is running on Tor with more privacy-aware features. So the ecosystem is growing aware of the needs of privacy improvements in Bitcoin. And I think they are coming. And I think they are probably the most urgent thing to address, because there is time to scale Bitcoin after. I don't think there is time to fix a broken fungibility or privacy after. So we have to fix that now.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move into more interesting / personal questions, and I'm going to get also one from our chat on YouTube. Interestingly, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was asked from one of the guys in the chat. So starting from, let's start from this one. Have you ever feared the risk that Bitcoin might displace traditional finance at a rate faster than expected, and the lack of supporting infrastructure at this point to support and the traditional, money system, and the possible dramatic consequences of that, like a black swan type of event?
Yeah, I did, and that's what makes my feelings about Bitcoin very and global financial infrastructure very, very mixed. Because on one hand, I know that Bitcoin can can accelerate a deep disruption of the financial system, and can itself benefit from an independent disruption of the financial system. Just to make an example, the email protocol didn't spread while the physical post offices were crumbling down. I mean, the physical post offices were working fine, and the email slowly emerged as a better alternative, while Bitcoin could emerge as a better alternative while the traditional financial world is crumbling down again, like in 2008. So on one hand, I know that that's probably inevitable, and that will probably make Bitcoin successful, definitely faster and deeper. So that's a bullish case for Bitcoin. But on the other hand, I know that the sooner it comes, the less prepared the infrastructure will be. So I really hope that it will come later than sooner, for selfish reason, because so I can accumulate more, and also for structural reasons about infrastructure readiness.
Okay, now some time for the personal questions. They asked the top three, actually the favorite Bitcoin books, but I'm going to change a little bit. I'm going to say the top three Giacomo's all-time favorite books.
Yeah, because answering the top three Bitcoin books will not be easy. Basically, there is one top book, which is the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, and I don't have many other favorite books. I really like the Internet of Money collection of talks by Andreas Antonopoulos, and I did use Mastering Bitcoin as one of the first resources at the beginning, while the Bitcoin Standards is like the book right now. It's everybody's very excited about it. So let's switch to the non-Bitcoin books that I prefer, and those will be, I think, they will be like the Silmarillion by J.R. Tolkien. I love the Silmarillion. It's very, very nerdy, I know, but it's epic, and I loved it. And then I would say The Human Action by Ludwig van Mises. The best, one of the book which changed my understanding of economics and human action the most. So I really, it's both the Silmarillion and these are very, very, they're not easy books. They are like, it's like, hard money, hard books. It's not easy books. And the third one would be a strange, I don't think that this one exists outside Italy. Actually, there was a newspaper in Italy selling a collection of quotes and aphorisms from famous people, and there were several volumes of these collections. And one volume was very strange because it was uniting Gilbert K. Chesterton, the English writer, with Oscar Wilde, the Irish author. And these are like together, these are like two of the best quote producers ever, in my opinion. Like the best aphorisms are from Chesterton or from Oscar Wilde, and they are so different, like two very, very opposite and contrasting and provocative and paradoxical and smart intelligences that I just love that book. It's probably one of the books I read more times in my life.
And if I can give my own suggestion for people interested in economics, I find Ludwig von Mises' Socialism to be one of the most interesting economic books that I've ever read. And I have read quite a few because I'm interested in economics. So for those that wants to learn more about Austrian economics, I would suggest Socialism by Ludwig von Mises.
Agree. Very good book.
Going to the next, top 3 Bitcoin projects, non-coin, that interest you the most at the moment.
So probably they are, this answer is not original at all. So Lightning Network, but it's true. It's something that can change everything about usability and privacy and everything. And the second will be the project that I'm sponsoring and pushing a lot right now, which is RGB, which is an attempt to do collectibles and assets on a public blockchain. So mostly on top of Lightning Network itself, but also it's a way to experiment with the new architecture and design imagined by Peter Todd, which is the client-side validation model, which is very, very intriguing and interesting for Bitcoin. And 3 would be probably the I would say Wasabi / Samurai privacy innovations experiments in Bitcoin wallets.
All right. So we're coming toward the end. I get one more questions from the chat. I get this one about Bcash. What happened with Roger Ver the last few days? So when the Bcash people are tired of infighting, do you think they will come back, and will Roger Ver again support Bitcoin? I like this one.
I think that eventually, I think that eventually, if Bitcoin is going to work as intended, everybody will at least secretly, at least personally, support Bitcoin, because everybody will own Bitcoin basically as a storage of wealth and a store of value. So yeah, Roger Ver will eventually love Bitcoin again and store Bitcoin again, because it will work as money, as gold, and everybody loves gold. And even if you despise gold, you still keep your gold and you still want gold because it's gold. So I don't think that they will have to, differently from gold, Bitcoin is also a little bit like a brand. So you can despise a brand, but you still, I mean, everybody despises Coca-Cola, right? Like it's evil, capitalist thing. Everybody drinks Coca-Cola. So everybody will love Bitcoin, even if publicly they attack the brand. So I think that this Bcash clown show will probably, it's interesting because it's now many Bcasher are actually they are actually complaining for the same reason that Bitcoiners were complaining against Bcash. Like somebody, like I think it was the yours.com guy. He said it's dishonest that people is trying to sell Bitcoin ABC as Bitcoin without informing the buyers, which is exactly what Roger Ver is doing with Bcash. And Roger Ver is now worried about controversial hard forks as attacks on the system. So yeah, welcome.
He admitted that, you know.
Yeah, he did. He said I was wrong about that. So that's already something. I don't think. I mean, this is a highly adversarial environment. So I think that our barrier, our adversarial thinking barrier should be very, very high. If anything, maybe we should be wrong on the safe side than on the unsafe side. So in doubt, an actor should be considered a bad actor. So maybe somebody really apologizes for what he did because it was mistaken, and he explains the mistakes. Maybe we can be a little bit more easygoing. But I think that the reasonable and prudent and conservative and rational approach toward everybody involved, like Roger Ver, in scam coin promotion, not just Bcash, but also Dash and other stuff, and Zcash. The reasonable approach should be of the highest skepticism and of suspect and adversarial thinking first. Then you can grab a beer with him and you can be his friend, but you should not probably legitimize him in the eye of newcomers, because that's dangerous for people.
So just to summarize, you think Bcash is gonna fork out of existence, or?
Well, blockchains and shitcoins are very, it was Joshua Ansett who said that these things are very, very difficult to kill. Like there's still somebody trading Aurora coin probably, or so it's almost impossible to really completely kill for now, until this FOMO and this craziness and this bubble will be disappear since years. I think that no scam coin will really die completely, but they will fade slowly into irrelevance. And I think that Bcash time could well be after this infight, because I mean, right now Bcash was based on some rhetorics and some arguments. Basically, it was a conspiracy theory against Bitcoin Core or Blockstream or whatever, and now they don't have the enemy anymore on their chain. So their narrative, which was anti-something, is now completely empty, and now they're finding that all their heroes were actually villains, and that's, I mean, I have a lot of hard time to think any rational person that would have any expectation over Bcash right now. But I'm always surprised by people, so who knows?
Listen, Giacomo, thank you very much for taking the time. I think we're done for tonight. And actually, double thank you, because I know you're not 100%. Hope you get better soon.
Thank you.
And I hope to have you again soon. And if you are in London, we'd love for you to join us at Bitcoin and Blockchain London.
Sure, with pleasure. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye, everyone.